Welcome to Dating Log, the podcast that records the ups and downs of dating in your 30s and beyond. We've decided it's time to get some advice from the experts, someone who knows the dating world inside out and whose job it is to help others navigate it too. This is episode 14, Dario, the dating coach. Dario van der Kraken is a dating coach based in London and works mostly online with clients from all over the world. This conversation is jam-packed with professional advice. For Dario, the journey of coaching starts from within. He covers the theme of love addiction, yep, that's a thing, and he shares his perspectives on finding, quote, the true love that everybody is searching for. Handing over to our regular host Wyndham for this insightful conversation. And a quick reminder, stay tuned for Dating Log's second season, coming soon.
So my name is Dario, and I'm a dating and relationship coach, and I specifically work with gay guys that are having trouble finding, their footing in dating, finding, their good, balanced, healthy love life, which is so common these days, I find. And I started actually, as a coach because I had the world of troubles in my 20s, in my dating life. It was just horrible. I had like the worst time ever. And it wasn't actually until I think I was in my 30s when I started to finally feel like I knew who I was, I knew what I wanted, and my life really changed. And most of the change actually is down to years and years of therapy. I went into therapy when I was in my 20s because at some point after like the yet another rejection, I felt, okay, this is not normal. There's something is happening. I'm not approaching things in the right way, so I need some help. And I'm really proud of my 20 something year old self for doing that, for asking for help, because going to therapy was the best investment that I've ever done in my life. And I'm reaping the benefits now, like even like 10 years later, because I feel happy every day. I'm not saying like, all day, every day, but I do am happy most of the days. So if people want to take something from today's episode, just ask for help. If you feel like you can't do it, if you try to do things on your own and you can't, just ask for help, because there are people out there that can help you, people that have gone through the same things that you are going through. So at least it doesn't make you feel alone and your life can really change.
Can you let our listeners know which market are you operating in? Where are your clients based?
So my clients are based all over the world because I only work online. And yeah, so right now I'm working with a client in Indonesia, for example. I work with clients in, well, all over Europe, in the States, in New Zealand. The only limit is the time zone difference, really.
And so, dating coach in and of itself is a pretty niche job. So, what made you want to become a dating coach? I mean, you did your own therapy, and I can maybe assume you were doing something else with your life.
So coaching is because, as I said, I went to therapy and my life changed. So I've always had it in me. I've always thought that I wanted to help other people, the same way that I was helped. But I was never gonna go, back to university and do, the specialization schools and study for another 10 years to become a counselor, or a psychologist, or a therapist. And then it was actually during at the beginning of the pandemic that I don't know how. I just got like this light bulb moment, and I said, "Well, okay, I might never be, a therapist or a psychologist, but I can become a coach, and I can help people in this way. Might not be, as full-fledged as a psychologist services, but I can still do my part, and I can draw my experiences." And so that's what I did. I did a course in transformational coaching. I passed my course, I qualified, I did a lot of hours of practice, and then I started out. Yeah, so it's been a few years now.
Cool. When you're working with someone, let's say they reach out to you on the form via your website, what does the process kind of look like?
So you can either book a session right away with me, or you can get in touch and we can have an exploratory call. So some people really need the help right away. So I find that letting them book a session right away is probably is the first thing, is the thing that probably they need the most. But if you are thinking about, if you're not sure that you want to start a coaching journey, then you're very welcome to just get in touch with me. We'll have an exploratory call, and we basically talk about why you are thinking about getting into coaching. And I tell you, if I can help you, because there are things that, as a coach and not as a counselor, I'm not qualified to help with, like traumatic events. This is something that coaches cannot really deal with. So I might refer you to some psychologist friends, but mostly, I think the exploratory calls, and I speak from experience as well, are to find out whether we are a good fit. So maybe you don't like me, maybe you don't like the way I am, maybe you don't understand my accents, maybe I don't understand yours, maybe there is no, chemistry there, and that is absolutely fine. So that's what these introductory calls are for. And then if we decide to move ahead, then we normally set a number of sessions, a number of weeks that we work together. And in our first session, we establish what the goal for the main goal for us is, well, for the client mostly. So that we always have that as like the Northern Star, and we don't, go off tangents if it's not useful to reaching that goal. And then we start.
What kind of people are coming to you? What state are they in when they arrive in your inbox?
Most of the times I find they are in a very hectic times in their lives, in a very chaotic times. And if there is an adjective that describes most of the people that come to into my inbox, is, I would say, lost. They feel a little lost. They've tried different ways. They have different challenges they have not been able to overcome, and so they are borderline on hopeless, lost, borderline on hopeless. And so what they need from me is kind of like a plan. So bringing some structure into what they are dealing with and how they can overcome it, and clarity as well. One thing that I really benefited from my years in therapy and coaching now as well, because I still have a coach and I do coaching, and I think everybody should do, but I'm biased, is like clarity. When my coach, my mentor, my therapist was able to actually say, okay, so you're experiencing A, B, C, D, and this is because of X. So even just give it a name, a label, is something that helps so much.
You said like the word chaos. People are coming in this kind of feeling a bit lost. Like dating clearly hasn't worked for them. So they've reached out to find a dating coach. Do you notice common themes or mistakes, let's say in your eyes, that people tend to struggle the most with?
Yes. How much time do we have? Okay, so the first one, and it's something that is by no means just specific to gay guys, but it's like such a common thing that I find in with it, like talking to friends or talking to acquaintances, is that we want to find love so badly that we are willing to compromise on who we are, even like the core of our own selves. And that never works. That will never work, because then what kind of love are we, like, we can't really find love if we don't love ourselves. I mean, RuPaul is right. If you don't love yourself, how in the hell are you gonna love somebody else? That's actually correct. So if you are prepared to chase after people that they don't really give a crap about you, or they're asking you to change, or that you have to change in order to please, that will never be a healthy, happy form of love. Yes, you might be able to establish a relationship with someone, and that maybe will be helpful for a while in order for you not to feel lonely, but then this is never going to last. And even if it lasts, it's not going to be a happy one. So there's something inherently wrong with the way that it was formed. So I would say this compromising on who they are, on their values, in order to find love, because they believe that, and that is like the second most common thing, this love that will magically change their lives in 1 second, and everything will then turn into, flowers and rainbows and stars and sprinkles. That is not what love is. This is like such a common misconception that is fostered by, the society and the culture as a whole. Love is actually something that is so ordinary. And I say that because love, the real love, the happy one, the healthy one, doesn't really change who you are. It doesn't really change your life, just complements it in a wonderful, extraordinary way, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. So when I was able to find love, it was such like an effortless, natural experience. It was an extension of my life and myself that, sometimes when I took a step back and just analyzed the whole thing, I remember like thinking, this is so normal. This feels so normal to me. And that was something that I never expected, because I was just like many of us, like one that thought that, once I am able to find love, then my life is going to change and everything will just, feel better and taste better, and it would be like a completely different world just because I had this love. But actually, no, it felt the opposite. It felt like normal. It felt like meant to be. It felt like a part of myself. But because I was able to do a shitload of work on myself and be able to approach dating and love life in a way that was really in line with my values and my core beliefs and basically being 100% myself.
This is something that has also come up in the podcast with different guests. This idea of finding love and finding a relationship. They're not always synonymous with each other the way people talk about them. Sometimes people say, I'm looking for a relationship. Sometimes people say, I'm looking for a life partner. Sometimes people say, I'm looking for love. Are these things mutually exclusive? Do they go together? How does it work with you and your coaching? What do you say to people?
So normally what I say to people is I ask a lot of questions. So this is another misconception about the role of the coach. People think that a dating coach is like a sports coach. So I'm going to tell you what to do and I'm going to tell you where to go and I'm going to tell you what to say. But actually, no, like coaching, especially transformational coaching, is much more about asking the right questions so that my client will find the answers. Because I might have my own answers, but they are my own. They work for me, and they might not necessarily work for you, especially when it comes to the realm of emotions and feelings. It's all very individual. It's all down to who we are as a person. So I wouldn't say that finding a relationship, finding love are mutually exclusive. Not at all. I would hope not. But I would definitely ask, okay, so what is the difference? What do you think is the difference between finding a relationship and finding love? And then see what they say and go from there.
And what's important to them as well. Like you mentioned values.
Yeah, values are so important. So I think over my years of dating, and then coaching, but always kind of dating because I've been in a relationship for 5 years now. But before, I was basically single for most of my life. But I was able to come up with a few, I'll say, like guidelines for dating, and those are guidelines that I use with my clients as well. And the first one is always know who you are. If you know who you are in a much better position to understand to approach dating and approach other people from a very centered, a very grounded position. If you don't know who you are, it's like being a ship in a storm. So you get taken here and there by, whatever winds or whatever storms blows. But when you know who you are, then you are an island in the middle of the storm. So even if there is like storm all around you, then at least you know who you are and you can better navigate that.
Is everyone coachable in your opinion?
The beautiful thing about coaching or therapy is that it's not mandatory. So you have to want to be there in order to do it. And for most of my life with like friends that have gone into therapy or had coaching, we've always said, oh, therapy should be made mandatory for everyone because it's such a good investment. And once you have the tools to analyze what is happening to you, you're actually able to see what is happening for other people, but they are unaware of what is happening because they haven't been through the process. They don't have the tools to manage what is happening to them, and it's just a pity. So one thing I remember of my first years in therapy is that you kind of want to basically do therapy to everyone because you know that they don't know better and you just want to help them because on the other side is much better and it's it's just like another world. So we always said, oh, therapy should be made mandatory. But to be honest with you, it shouldn't, because if it is something that is forced on you, then it doesn't really work. What works, and this is something I find very, very liberating, is that I read studies that says that say that the best clients, the clients that get the most out of coaching or therapy, are not the ones that are burning to with the desire to fix themselves, but with the desire to learn about themselves and about how their brain works and their mind works. And I find that to be so true, because once you know what triggers you and why, then you don't need to want to fix yourself. It's something that automatically happens. So if you approach therapy or coaching with curiosity, like, why am I reacting this way? Why, XYZ saying, these things is making me feel like so on edge. And once you know the reason why, it's not like you actually fix yourself, or, that trigger doesn't work for you anymore, but you put a frame, you put some context around it. That is what basically frees you, what liberates you, because the next time that the trigger is happening, you'll be able to recognize and say, okay, so this is happening because of that. And then, a couple of times after the triggers happen again, you'll be able to say, okay, well, yeah, I can feel it like happening. I can feel that I'm being triggered, but I'm not interested in reacting to it anymore. And that's how you change, but without really wanting to fix yourself, because I don't believe we need to be fixed. We just need to understand who we are, what we want, and our past history, and how it still affects us in ways that we're not aware of.
When I go to your website and I look at it, there is a pop up that comes up, and also towards the bottom, I see a big break the cycle of toxic relationships. Is this a theme in dating? And can you tell me more about, yeah, how are you encouraging or helping people to, yeah, stop these cycles, to recognize these triggers? How does that work?
I'm not gonna lie, it's not something that it's gonna be solved in like a nanosecond, like most marketers and more most people out there actually say, oh, fix this in 1 second and then you'll be free. It's a long process, but it starts with being aware that, first of all, being aware that something is not working, something is not making you happy in your life at the moment. And I think it's very important to admit that. That is a massive first step, when you admit that something is not working, and that you might need to do something about it, whether it is to, research some more, ask for help. But admitting that something is not working is the first step. And then what follows is kind of a long process, but I believe that it's a beautiful journey when you decide, that even when you admit that something is not working, and that might make you feel like, I don't know, a failure, or like you've done something wrong, or that your life is absolutely a disaster. It's actually not that. It's a sign of absolute strength. And once you start thinking about your life and taking care of what it is that is not working, I think it's such a beautiful, loving gesture that you can make to yourself. So just because there is something that is not working, just because you're not happy, doesn't mean that your life is a failure. It just means that you need to pay more attention to it. Field of my niche of expertise is actually love addiction, because I suffered from it for for as long as I can remember, and I still suffer from it, despite having having been kind of diagnosed, and knowing the ways that it works. I still feel every now and then in my relationship that there are those dynamics that still come into play, but I'm able to recognize them, and I'm able to manage them and do something about them so that they don't take over my life.
What is love addiction?
Basically, love addiction is when you are paying so much attention to your partners or your dates, thoughts, feeling, and everything, and to the point that you are basically erasing yourself. I can tell you like a more definition, like a proper scientific definition of love addiction, but I find that if I explain this with these words, more people will recognize themselves in it, or at least in parts of it. It's like when you are thinking, instead of thinking, oh, what do I want to have for dinner? Automatically, your brain goes, what is, my partners will want to have for dinner, or my date? How can I make my date happy? So instead of thinking about what makes you happy, it will makes you, fulfilled. You're always thinking about somebody else's. It can be your partner, it can be, some authority figures in your life, but the core of it is that basically 100% of your mind and brain activity is devoted to the other, and there's 0% devoted to you. One of the things that people can do in order to step out of this, at least for just like a couple of seconds every day, which will still be an achievement, is to start asking themselves, okay, but what do I want? You're not going to have an answer for it right away because you're not used to thinking about yourself. So there is a whole journey of discovery there. But I think is one very teeny tiny action that you can take on a daily basis that, if you do it, every day in 6 months, a year, is going to have a much bigger effect, and you're going to start to you know at least not be fully dependent on the other, but you will start seeing that you are part of the equation too.
I'm hearing a lot about like self work and reflecting on your own patterns and behaviors. And I guess less about more the practicalities of dating. So, how do you measure the success of your clients? Is it actually going on dates or getting relationships, or is it the growth that's coming from these sessions? What does success look like for you?
Well, for me, it's all of it. So all of the above, everything that you mentioned, I think for me is seeing them approach their daily life with less anxiety and more fun, more freedom. So being them more secure in themselves, going out on dates. Depending on how the date goes, it's not something that it's in your power, in their power anyway, to whether the date is a success or not a success. So I think for me is more like the overall approach. But when you start doing coaching, you go on to coaching for one thing, one very well defined goal. But to be honest with you, then the ripple effects when you start like moving things in your mind is not just in dating, but it's in on your whole life. So it can be like work, relationship with colleagues, relationship with parents. So something the shift in family dynamics as well. So everything is part of what I consider to be a success. But yeah, there was like this client of mine, for example, that had this goal of actually crying. She wasn't able to cry. She wasn't able to express her emotion through, tears, despite wanting to do so. And so we did like a lot of like a long emotional journey about the reason why she wasn't able to and what was happening in like the moments where she felt like crying, but then she also felt like couldn't. So obviously there was something that was blocking the tears from coming out. And then there was a lot of work of I say like giving a new meaning to what the tears were compared to what she was taught when she was a child. And then she was able to, on our last session, because at some point, coaching is gonna end because the clients, the people have the instruments to then go on and then live life and do the work without needing to be coached, because then it's like you leave a part of yourself. I leave a part of myself with my clients, and there's something like my therapist, they left a part of themselves with me. But it also goes like for every kind of coach. Like my tennis coach, my first tennis coach is always with me when I play tennis, so it's something that just stays, and that is the beautiful part of it. But then yeah, on our last session, she ended up actually crying, and that was an amazing moment. So it's not just about the dating, it's not just about the finding love, finding a partner, but it's also just this I think it is milestones within yourself. So they are very, very, yeah, private, but I think they are the best ones as well.
I like what you said about the ripple effect. I can totally see that happening. You make one little change and then it radiates into all these other facets and arguably other relationships in your life as well.
Yeah, one of my breakthrough when I was in therapy was that I was very successful professionally, so I've always been, and I was a utter failure when it came to dating. So there was these two part of me that I couldn't really reconcile, because in my mind, if you are successful at something, then you should be successful at everything else, right? So one of my big breakthrough was actually that I was applying the rules of, I don't know, like the university exams to dating. So I felt, well, not I felt, like I was absolutely convinced that the success of my dating life was just 100% dependent on me. And like there wasn't anybody else in the picture. It sounds like so simple and so trivial to say now, but I felt that I was responsible for 100% of what happened during my dates, during my relationship. And by doing that, by being convinced of that, it was like I was removing the other. I was removing my partner. I was removing my dates from having responsibility for their 50%. So if I was out on a date with someone and it went well, but then I wouldn't really hear from him anymore, then I would feel totally responsible because for that. So I would feel that I had done something wrong, that I wasn't, handsome enough, that I wasn't funny enough, that I was never enough, or I was too much. So it was all down to me. And something that I realized, and again, it might seem very simple. It sounds so simple now that I say that, and so basic, but you can only do up to a certain point in a relationship because there are other people involved. It's not like when you're trying to study for a university exam that it's kind of all down to you, which is not really true because there is your professor involved as well. There is luck. There is like some random factors, but it is much more about yourself than other people. But when it comes to dating, it is about other people. It's not just about you. It's about you and someone else. So there's only so much that you can do. There's only so much that you can be responsible for. And that was one of my breakthrough.
What are some common, let's say, quote, mistakes that you see people making as far as dating?
So, as I said before, compromising on their values and their core beliefs is one of them. And I can tell you that, if you're feeling that a part of you is being an important part of you is kind of dying when you give an answer to your partner or your date, this is like a massive red flag, and you should take notice of that. Because when I can tell you, for example, when I had my first relationship, I was so in love in kind of like an unhealthy way. Um, and I've always wanted kids, even if I was gay. I've known that I was gay since I was 8 years old, and but I've always known that I wanted kids. So I've always thought, I don't know, in some ways I'm gonna be able to have kids. So I never really worried too much. But with this first boyfriend, I remember when we like after a couple of months in the relationship, we talked about kids, and he didn't want to have them. And because I was so in just like prey of this love addiction dynamics, I've said, oh yes, I don't want kids either. And I remember the moment that I felt like a part of me, a part of my heart just died then and there because I compromised on something that it was so essential to me. And that is something that I still is a moment that I still remember because this is what it feels like to compromise on something that you believe to be true and to believe that you believe to be absolutely yourself for in order to please somebody else, and thinking that if you please your partner or your date, then it means that you're gonna have like a relationship, you're gonna find love, whatever it is that your goal, whatever your goal is, it's never gonna work for you. It's never gonna work in the long term because you will always feel like you're not really there. You're compromised on too much or on something that it was just so important for you to be happy. So that is by far the most common mistake. It's hard to find a balance between what you feel you can compromise on, because of course, being in a relationship with someone, regardless of whether it is, a love relationship or a work relationship or a friend relationship, there are going to be some compromises. I think, my first rule of knowing who you are and knowing what your core values are, that's when it comes into play, because then you'll be able to know, what are the deal breakers and what instead is stuff that you might be willing to compromise on. So knowing yourself and knowing who you are and what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what you want out of life is really important. And then the second rule for me would be know what you want. And this is something that most people just don't do, especially people like me that just wanted to find love and were like willing to compromise on everything and anything in order to find it. But what is it that you want out of I don't know, your partner or your relationship, your life with your partner. And something that I always advise my clients to do is every time that you go on dates or you start, dating someone or a relationship with someone and then they don't work out, it's really important to understand, what it is about this particular date or this particular relationship that didn't work for you, so that you kind of find that you start a list of what you don't want and what you want in a partner or in a relationship. It's something that works quite well because it takes the attention away from the fact that, a date that doesn't go well is a failure, which is not. But many people, feel, especially when they are on a mission to find love, every time that so every date is an opportunity to find the love. And when that opportunity doesn't materialize and something goes wrong, then they feel like a failure. And it's not absolutely what what it happens. But, if you start saying, oh, okay, so with this guy, it didn't work because actually he was evil, he was cruel. I don't like that. I don't want that in a guy. So let's make a list of things that you don't want. So that takes you, that they makes, I find that this process makes, puts all the dates in kind of perspective as like a journey that you yourself are on, regardless of who you are on in a relationship with or on a date with, and it takes the sting away from the perceived failures that you can have when something doesn't work out in your dating life. Because I mean, it doesn't work out like more times that it does work. So that's normal.
What do you notice as far as trends in the dating industry and anything that's relevant for people in their 30s and beyond?
So I was actually lucky to spend my early 20s in a world without dating apps. So if I wanted to meet someone, I had to actually go to a club and go talk to someone in person right away. I find that dating apps have changed the landscape completely. Because now when I go into clubs, and I don't go to clubs that often anymore, but when I go, I am amazed to see, people side by side or like 1 meter apart, but they are talking to one another on Grinder or whatever dating app instead of talking to each other. It's like we have become so afraid of rejection that we don't even go and talk to one another anymore because we're so afraid of being rejected. And I have to say, unfortunately, that is justified because talking to someone, especially when you are living maybe in like a big metropolis, just like London, for example, but I probably believe that it's the same in everywhere else in the world. When you go talk to someone, like when you approach them, it's just seen as like an overstep of the boundaries that you always start, I don't know, thinking that the person who approaches you is like crazy or on drugs or, there's something wrong with them. So we haven't really made life easier for each other to just talk and get to know one another. I love like dating apps, and I don't have anything like because I think they brought more benefits to us than drawbacks. But I think one negative side to them is that we stopped communicating in real life anymore. And I've always been one to just take everything from offline to online to sorry, from online to real life as soon as possible. So even when I was on my own dating apps, I would spend maybe, just a couple of days talking to someone, but my goal was to, if there was, some sort of chemistry there, I just wanted to bring it to real life as soon as possible, just because sometimes the chemistry that you have online with someone that doesn't really translate into real life. And I didn't want to spend, months talking to someone online and then build all these castles in my mind, hello, love addiction, to then, find that all my hopes were then crushed when we met in real life because the hype just like, because like the real experience didn't match up to what I had in my mind. When I'm interviewed, asked about dating apps and experience on dating apps, and for me, I always try to convey the message that what happens on dating apps, it's not real life. So if you know someone on a dating app, it's not like saying someone is your friend in real life. So you still have to break the ice and kind of bring that online relationship into offline, into a real life territory. It's scary. It can be scary, but we're humans. That's what we are meant to do, not spend our lives online. And like I'm saying that as an online marketing specialist as well. the real life, especially from the point of view of feelings, happens, in offline.
Yeah, app management was a big topic of conversation over season one. People they don't want to reply too soon. They don't want their profile to be too cheesy. They don't want to attract the wrong type. How do you open a conversation? So, fun question for you. What's better than saying, "Hey, how's it going?"
Oh, yes. So, and again, this is like because we are bombarded with messages from, especially if you have like 3 or 4 apps on your phone, then you are probably bombarded with messages, and you kind of have to stand out from the crowd. Also, hi, how it's going? It works in real life because you take into account, the effort that the person has made in order to muster the courage to come up to you, which is something that I've always admired. um, but online, hey, how it's going, it's not really making much of an effort, is it? So I would say start, well, start experimenting with opening lines, and it could be something funny. Like for a while, I used something like, "Please don't tell me you're one of the people that claps when a plane lands." So something like that, like, "Hi, I'm Dario. Please tell me that." And it was it was probably a horrible line, but it kind of broke the ice, and it made them laugh. And if it didn't make them laugh, then they would block me, and I knew that they were not my type, so it was alright. But at least it kind of stood out, and it almost always guaranteed a reply, which is something that, it's very hard to come by these days.
Our last episode was called The Litmus Test of Dating. And we talked about, in the business terms, let's say KPIs or milestones. In your mind, what are those? Like, how, let's say, are your clients measuring? Like, you talked about their personal goals. That's one thing, their personal growth and how they are approaching situations. But in terms of dating, what are those steps that, yeah, get them towards a relationship?
Yeah, they vary with from clients to clients because I guess it depends on their culture, it depends on their what point in their life they are. But I can tell you that for me, so moving, so speaking about conversion rates, moving people from dating app to WhatsApp was a very important step. So WhatsApp for me was basically the step before going out on a real date in real life. So dating app to WhatsApp, and then WhatsApp to real date in real life, for me, these two were very big KPIs. So, and you want to have, people, of course, you start talking to, if we're talking about marketing funnel, you start talking with 100 people on a dating app, but then maybe 10 make the cut and get to WhatsApp. And then depending on what your strategy is and what you're comfortable with, then maybe half of them then you arrange a date with. And then how many of these 5 dates are gonna go well? Potentially 2 or 3, and then you start, interacting with them. I've never been a fan of like the rules like in Sex and the City's Charlotte rules, like you have to wait until the third day to sleep with him. I don't believe in that. I think you need to do whatever feels right for you. I've had successful relationship that started with a one night stand, and very bad relationship that ended without, after 10 dates, without really getting to the bedroom. I don't think that we are at that point in evolution where getting someone to bed right away or after 3 days or after two dates means or can actually tell how the relationship is going to go. It's a relationship that's so much more than that. But one thing that I've always done is, even if I was going out on dates with different guys, if I, as soon as I felt that I really liked someone, or that potentially there was something that could develop with someone, that I would devote like 100% of my dating effort to them. So I would actually abandon the other one. I would, stop dating, abandon. Oh my
Abandoned.
God, that's horrible. Abandon. No, 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 no.
That is a strong
Never,
word.
never abandon without an explanation. Never. No, I would stop dating the other ones and just fully concentrate on that. And that was something that for me was important because it was part of who I was. It was part of my values, and something that I was expecting from the other one, my date, was also that if we, felt that there was something that could potentially develop into something serious, then I would expect them to kind of do the same. So focus just on me without, because if they suffered from FOMO, then I knew they weren't right for me. But if they were, willing to invest into whatever that was and see where it would go, then for me there was a big positive sign. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in the age of abandonment and ghosting, a big question that a lot of our guests had was how you've gone on a few dates and you know it's not working. How and when do you break it off?
So sometimes it will be you that will have the clarity to see that things are not working, that, the two of you are not a match. Sometimes it will be the other one, the other, your date would have this clarity and then would tell you that things are not working. What I find that we need to do a lot of education in society about is that just because something doesn't work between two people, it doesn't mean that one is okay and one is not okay, or one is right and the other is wrong, one is good and the other is bad. No, it just means that it's not a match, but both of you are actually okay. It just wasn't a match, and that's okay. I read a lot of psychology books, as you can imagine, because I'm so interested about this stuff, and also to just keep myself up to date with the latest study. And these abandonment crises that I have experienced when I was dating, they are becoming more and more frequent in people that are in people. I was gonna say people that are dating, but actually they are common in people in a relationship as well. This fear of being abandoned, which is something that stemmed from a very early age when we were like babies, and we needed to rely on someone else in order to survive. It's not the case anymore, but this is something that stick with us. So we need to kind of like give a new meaning to this breaking up, this stop dating when something just doesn't work. Because it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're not okay. You're both like equally okay people. You're just not a match, and that is fine. It's gonna happen. But one thing that I say is I am like a true believer in communication. So if it is an uncomfortable conversation, I know it's hard, but those are the conversations that you need to have in order to grow as a person. Those are the conversations that you shouldn't really shy away from. Having a hard conversation, first of all, can strengthen someone's bond. Yeah, maybe the two of you are not a match for like a romantic match. Maybe you're a match as, friends, or potentially you can still keep in touch, and you never know. And this hard conversation, this very uncomfortable conversation that, by the way, are not just uh, about dating. You have hard conversations when you are in a relationship. Even a happy, healthy relationship, you still have uncomfortable conversations to have. And that is the same in, at work, with your family, with your friends. There will always be some hard conversation. But hard conversation or uncomfortable conversation doesn't mean necessarily confrontation. This is something that people are afraid of confrontations. I don't like confrontations at all. I tend to be like a people pleaser. It's in my nature. But where I find strength to approach this uncomfortable conversation is that you're both gonna get on the other side of it much stronger. Even if the bond ends, you will be left with the feeling that you've done something that you were afraid of. You have been honest with the other person, and most of all, you were brave enough to actually tell them in their face rather than by a text message, or the worst, ghosting. So ghosting is like the plague of contemporary society. It's something that, to be honest, I can understand, but it comes from a place of cowardice rather than a place of whatever it is that people trying to justify with. I don't think it's ever okay to ghost anyone in life, because like at the end of at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're here on this planet. We should feel kind of a bond with one another just because of that. We are on this planet in the middle of the universe together. We should be kind to one another, and being kind sometimes being means telling some hard truths, but at least telling them with compassion to their face rather than behind their back, or even without telling them at all.
I'm with you on that. Ugh. We could talk quite a long time about ghosting, but I'm not going to get into that. So much about it. Do you have any advice or words of wisdom you would like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. Before looking outside of you, look inside you. Most of the things that you're trying to find outside you, they are inside you. And that goes actually before blaming, other people outside of you. Just maybe look inside yourself because you will find that there is some responsibility to be taken within you as well. Probably one of the most common mistakes that people make in dating is that people come to, especially when they are burned by a relationship, they come to me, or they go into therapy or to coaching, and they blame the other person. There is a big blame culture going on out there where we don't really take responsibility and we just blame the other people that we were dating or that we were in a relationship with. Now, I'm not talking about those instances where somebody cheated or there was like where the responsibility was 100% onto one side, but I find that for the vast majority of the relationships or datings or the dates that end not well, the responsibility is kind of shared. So when my clients come into coaching and when I see that they start blaming the other for everything, that for me is something that we really need to work on, because everybody then, after a therapy or a coaching journey, they find that there is so much responsibility that we need to be able to take for ourselves in our relationship. So, and even just because the other one has done something bad to us doesn't mean that we are completely innocent. So, but regardless of that, I always like to do that myself and to encourage my clients to just look inside themselves to see what they have done and how they have handled the situation, whatever situation they are in order to get some more learnings for them for the future. This is not just like something that they do for their partners, it's something that they do for them. So everything that we learn from a relationship, regardless of the outcome, is something that we always bring with ourselves and forever. So, and that's how, we grow as human beings as well.
Dating Log is recorded and hosted by Wyndham Juno. It's produced by me, Harry Dark, and our artwork is in collaboration with Esme Hemming Studio. A big thank you to today's guest, Dario van der Kraken. You can find him on Instagram at dario.lifecoach or check out his website at www.dario.coach. Whilst you're at it, you can follow us on Instagram at Dating Log Podcast, now to be found on YouTube and TikTok. Our website is datinglogpodcast.com. Would you like to be a guest on the show or know someone who should? Then send us a message, DMs are open, or email us datinglogpodcast@gmail.com. Please like, subscribe, review wherever you listen. We'll be back soon with more episodes. In the meantime, please don't ghost us.